I wrote a book about 10 years ago about how families used to raise healthy children using the resources they had available to them in their environment, whole foods, basically. The book is called Deep Nutrition: Why Your Genes Need Traditional Food. And what it does is basically take a look at the obvious changes that have happened in the past 100 years to our food supply, the way we feed ourselves, that amount essentially to a massive nutritional and dietary experiment involving hundreds of millions of participants in this country alone over hundreds of years. And the obvious is that 100 years ago, people were self-sufficient in their food to a degree that we can't even really comprehend anymore. But what I want to share with you is that the most important change, in my opinion, as a Cornell-trained biochemist, is that we now eat 80% of our fat calories from refined, bleached, deodorized vegetable oils, and only 20% of our fat calories come from any kind of whole foods. These vegetable oils include soy, corn, and canola, and they are nobody's friend. I've heard nobody up here talking about how we need refined, bleached, deodorized vegetable oils. They are unhealthy because they deteriorate in our body in ways that promote inflammation, that promote DNA damage, mitochondrial damage, and are associated, that kind of damage is associated with every disease.
Ladies and gentlemen, could the seed oils be the primary cause of the diseases of civilization? Heart disease, hypertension, stroke, cancers, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, macular degeneration, the list goes on and on. And could these so-called heart-healthy vegetable oils actually and ironically be the primary cause of heart disease and the major cause of all these other diseases of civilization as well? Take a look at this front page of an article from Harvard, if you would. Now, dare I have the audacity to question the Harvard School of Public Health? And the Nutrition Department of Tufts University? And the Nutrition Department of Mayo Clinic? And the American Heart Association?
Oils are composed of good fats, heart-healthy, or artery-clogging bad fats. Good fats include monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat, both of which lower total cholesterol and lower LDL, or bad cholesterol. Bad fats include saturated and trans fat, both of which raise LDL cholesterol. Store your cooking oils in a refrigerator or in a cool, dark location, as both light and heat damage oil.
This is Jones' paper from 2011. And what it shows is that in 1900, the top 3 causes of death were all infectious disease. It was pneumonia, tuberculosis, GI infections, right? Whereas by 2010, 7 of the top 10 causes of disease are all chronic disease. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, type 2 diabetes, all that, right? So let's walk through heart disease over the last 200 years. So from Jones' paper, we know that in Boston, in the town of Boston, in 1811, there were no heart disease deaths listed. All right? There was 25 sudden deaths. Probably most of those were cardiac valvular. All right? In the entire 19th century, there's 8 worldwide papers, reports essentially, of heart disease, extraordinarily rare disorder. 1897, Sir William Osler, famed physician of Johns Hopkins, he recounts his previous 21 years of hospital history, about 6 cases of angina, never seen an MI, never seen a heart attack. 1900, Jones' paper tells us 12.5% of people died of heart-related disease, but it was virtually all cardiac valvular. It was syphilis, endocarditis, rheumatic fever. Well, it wasn't coronary artery disease related, right? 1912, John Harry publishes the first known case of heart attack in the United States, documented with autopsy evidence. 1930s, though, heart disease becomes the leading cause of death. Virtually unknown 30 years earlier, all right? In fact, when John Harry published the paper about the MI, It wasn't even taken seriously for about a decade, all right? Advance forward to 2010, 32% of Americans dying of heart disease, virtually 1 in 3, all right? So the increase looks something like that red line right there. Cancer, Boston, 1811, 1 in 188 people died of cancer. 1900, it's rising, 1 in 17 in the US. 2010, 31.1% of people die of cancer, right? That's almost, again, 1 in 3. So the increase looks something like this. So back to cancer here, 62-fold increase in cancer in 200 years, right? How about type 2 diabetes? We know in the 19th century, diabetes of any type was rare and presumably rare for all of history prior. 1935, it's rising, 0.37%. This continues to rise. And we're at 9.4% by 2015. This is a 25-fold increase in type 2 diabetes in 80 years. How about obesity? 19th century. We know that obesity was 1.2% in men, age 18 to 80, in Texas and Nebraska prisons, right? Okay, look at this. By 1960, we're at 13% obesity. That was a 10-fold increase already, right, when we thought we were lean. So this continues to rise, and by 2015, we're at 39.8% obesity, right? This is a 33-fold increase in obesity in about 115 years, and we are on target to be at 50% of Americans obese by 2030. That was published in JAMA just a few weeks ago. Okay, age-related macular degeneration, my area of expertise. 1851 was when this disease was first discoverable. Between 1851 and 1930, there was no more than 50 cases of macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of irreversible vision loss and blindness in people over the age of 65. No more than 50 cases in all the world's literature. Yet, today, this year, 2020, 196 million people affected worldwide, on target to be 288 million by 2040. So what this means, back in the 19th century, 1 in many thousands of people affected. And I'm telling you, they were looking. I've read all the textbooks. Today, again, almost 1 in 3, 29% affected since 1990. Okay, there's the increase, essentially. All right, now we're going to hit 200 years of dietary history, which is really a global human experiment, is the way I look at this, without informed consent, right? Because nobody chose this. Sugar. 1822 to 1999, sugar went up 17-fold. We know sugar is a nutrient-deficient diet, nutrient-deficient food, right? Next, and the most important thing of all, cottonseed oil introduced right after the American Civil War, about 1866, 1867 is when we first began to consume this, and this is where the human experiment really began, all right? And you'll see why. 1880, we get roller mill technology, which gives us refined white wheat flour. Now, wheat is 20% of the world's diet. At least in the United States, 85% of that is refined, so it's nutrient deficient. 1911, Procter & Gamble gives us Crisco, trans fats, right? There we go. That's processed food. That's it. That's all of it right there. We had all the processed foods in place, essentially, by 1911. And then they just took off. So today in the United States, 600,000 foods available, and the bulk of them are made right out of that. Now, 1939 and 1945, Weston Price connected all of this together and made us all aware that Western diseases were driven by people consuming these foods, but nobody listened. And if you look at this, the far right slide there, from our own USDA, they recognize this. Those 4 foods make up 63% of the American diet, right? They know this is the problem. So diseases of civilization, the docs right there, look something like that. Okay, so let's get on the same page here, because vegetable oils have a lot of names these days, right? But vegetable oils, seed oils, also known as polyunsaturated vegetable oils, PUFA or polyunsaturated fatty acids, edible oils, now the newest euphemism, plant oils, I think, meant to just confuse us, omega-6 oils, and then linoleic acid. Now, linoleic acid, if you don't know, is the 18-carbon omega-6 fat that is sort of exemplary. It's the primary fatty acid of these vegetable oils, all right? It accounts for about 80% of the fatty acids. All right. Now, here's the dreadful ones, all right? The high PUFA oil, soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, grapeseed, sunflower, safflower, and rice bran. There, I've said it. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. These are the ones that are particularly dangerous.
I'm Michelle Babb, and I'm a registered dietitian. Soybean oil is one of the healthiest oils, and here's why. It's really high in polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, and those are the good unsaturated oils that are actually protective against things like cardiovascular disease. And it's also really relatively low in things like saturated fat, and in its liquid natural form, it's also free of trans fats. So it's very high in those good protective kinds of oils and low in what we would call the bad oils or the saturated fats. Many people are surprised that you can find soybean oil in a lot of the products that you probably already have in your pantry. So if you were to look at your vegetable oil, for example, it would be really likely that on the ingredient list you would see soybean oil. And the same goes for a lot of the dressings that you probably have in your refrigerator. Those also would be soybean oil based in many cases.
All right, so this is from our paper recently, and this is vegetable oil consumption in the United States for essentially all of history. Notice, 1866 to about 1909, we're like 2 grams a day. And then it just takes off as we start getting soybean oil and all these other oils, right? And so by 2010, we're at 80 grams a day. Okay, so we went from 0 in 1865 for all the world and for essentially all of history, pretty much, to 80 grams a day. Now let me just say, this is an infinite increase in vegetable oil consumption. A lot of people talk about Tanya Blasberg's research where soybean oil went up 1,000-fold between 1909 to 1999, which indeed it did. But all this vegetable oil is an infinite increase. 80 grams a day, folks, is 720 calories worth. That's 32% of US caloric intake. 1/3 of our diet is coming out of factories that make these oils. I can't tell you how dangerous this is. So 1900, 99% of our fats came from animal fat, lard, butter, beef tallow, and suet, essentially. But by 2005, 86% of added fats came from vegetable oils. And notice, the vegetable oils are still going up, right? Now, take a look at this. Here's where the dietary guidelines were introduced, right? 1980. And remember, our fat consumption was going down and our carb consumption is going up. So guess what? Our animal fat consumption is still trending down and our vegetable oil consumption is still going up. Now, this will look like a diversion, but it's not. This is the omega-6 linoleic acid in our adipose tissue in Americans, 1959 to 2008. Stephen Guinea collated 37 studies where they had biopsied the fat of Americans. Now look where our omega-6 linoleic acid was on average in 1959, 9.1%. Okay, this is in our fat. And do you know what our obesity was in 1959, 1960? 13%. Okay. In 2008, our linoleic acid in our fat, 21.5%. And you remember I showed you that in 2008, our omega-6 in our diet was 11.8%. In other words, it approximately doubles in your fat because we accumulate these. And they accumulate in your cells and in your mitochondria. And this is where they wreak havoc because it's polyunsaturated. And they're the ones that oxidize. All right, so 2008, you know what our obesity was? 34%. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you, I searched for 3 years to find this. You know what I wanted to know? What was the omega-6 fat in anybody's adipose who was on an ancestral diet? Anybody in the world. I finally found it. Tocopherols, right here. 3.8%. It is off the chart low. Remember I said their omega-6 in their diet was roughly 1%? 3.8%, people. This is where we should be. And this is what keeps you healthy. Right here. Okay, one more population. Tukasinta, Papua New Guinea. The Papua New Guineans in this study were evaluated extensively. 1966 to 68. Sweet potatoes account for more than 90% of their calories. They live off of over 1,000 different kinds of sweet potatoes. This is one of their harvests. They occasionally feast on pork and chicken. They are pork herders, but would rarely eat their pork. So here's their diet, 1966 to 68. 94.6% carb, 3% protein, 2.4% fat. Omega-6, there's that number again, 0.6%. Now, what'd they find about them? Here's what they say in the studies. Population was lean, physically fit, and in good nutritional state. Absence of obesity and hypertension. No diabetes or gout was found. Ischemic heart disease was rare if not absent. And no macular degeneration. 340 people over age 40, none. Now, absence of obesity. If we think that carbs drive insulin and insulin drives fat, how do we explain this? Okay, I'm just going to move on. Now, here, what do these healthy populations not have? No sugar, no refined wheat, no processed foods, and no vegetable oils, of course, right? So let's talk about their macronutrient ratios. Did the carb percent matter in these populations? Assuming you're consuming an ancestral diet, did it matter? No. It was 17% in the Maasai, about 95% in Tucacenta. How about the fat percent? Did it matter? Also, no. About 2.4% total fat in Tucacenta, 66% animal fat in Maasai. How about the fat composition? Did saturated fat seem to matter in any of this? Doesn't matter. About 1% Tucacenta, 45% in the Maasai, 48% in Tokelau. How about monounsaturated fat? Also doesn't matter. About 1% in Tucacenta, 53 to 65% in the Maasai. All of them fantastically lean, healthy, and without heart disease. Now the big question, what about the omega-6 PUFA? Right? This is the elephant in the room. I know people talk about this, but what should it be? 0.6 to 1.7%. I couldn't make the font any bigger than that. I tried. It's big, 93 or whatever it is, as big as it'll go. Okay, now compare this to westernized populations. The omega-6, 7 to 12% today in our diets. Remember, we were at 7% in 1999. Now we're at 12, or we were at 12% by 2008, 11.8%. Now I don't know where we are. I mean, we're higher than that. Okay, so let me explain what I think is going on here. Remember I said the problem is pro-oxidative and then toxic, right? Here's the pro-oxidative part. So when you consume omega-6 to excess, which is going to be a westernized diet, it'll have nutrient deficiencies, but what matters is it combines with reactive oxygen species like hydroxyl radicals, which we produce 1 × 10 to the 10th per day in every person. Okay, so this begins a catastrophic lipid peroxidation cascade. These polyunsaturated fats accumulate in your cells, accumulate in your membranes, accumulate in your mitochondria, and they cause a peroxidation reaction. So this is what I want to say. Really? These oils are these fats are the same? Are you kidding me? I mean, the fats coming out of these this is a real vegetable oil refinery. This is what I can't tell them apart from petroleum oil refineries. You know, they look the same. This is what I would say. This is toxic waste coming out of vegetable oil refineries. This is extraordinarily dangerous to us. And the other one is, you know, the animal fat's divinely healthy. So I would submit to you that this is how I would propose the contribution of processed foods to obesity and chronic disease. I would submit to you 80% of it is driven by vegetable oils and trans fats, and they run together because the trans fats are in the oils. Sugar, I would say, is about 15%, and refined wheat, the other 5%. All right. So how can we consume only about 1% omega-6 polyunsaturated fat? And you already know the answer, right? No seed oils. None. No vegetable oils. None of these kind of oils. No processed foods, because they're in all the processed foods, and no fast foods. Restaurants almost all cook in soybean oil and canola oil, and they are disastrous.